Okay, so our first joint is the cervical spine. Its anatomical name is the cervical spine. It has the atlas and the axis, and it has your C1 through C5 down your neck. The specific movement is flexion, so putting your chin down, and then we have extension, which is turning it back up, and then we have a lateral flexion, which is like side to side, so like touching your ear to your shoulder, and then we have rotation, which is turning it to the left or right. So then the planes of movement that they cross are your sagittal and your transverse, and it's on the linear axis. And then we have 2 degrees of freedom, making it a biaxial. So then our next one is our wrist. The anatomical name is the carpus. The joint it's a ellipsoidal. I think I said that right. The specific movements are flexion, so it's like turning your wrist this way. Then we have extension, which is turning it outwards. Then we have ulnar and radial deviation. Ulnar would be having like your pinky pointed out, and then radial would have like your thumb pointed in. So the planes of movement that they cross are sagittal, and then the specific axis is the linear axis. The wrist also has 2 degrees of freedom and is a biaxial. Next we have is our shoulders. The anatomical name is a glenohumeral joint. It's a ball and socket. Then the specific movements are flexion, so it would be like if you're sitting in a chair, rotating it up like this. And then we have extension, which would be rotating it backwards like this. Then we have abduction, which would be coming up from the side like this, and then adduction would be moving it right here and then moving it down. And then we have a lateral rotation, which would be like if it was arm out here and then up here, and then we have medial rotation, which is rotating it down. It crosses all 3 planes, so sagittal, frontal, and transverse, and it's an angular axis because it's ball and socket, and then it has 3 degrees of freedom, making it a triaxial. So our next one is our elbow and forearm. So for the elbow, it's the humerus, and then your forearm is made up of your radius and your ulna. This is a hinge joint. The movements are extension, which would be, it was like out like this, down by your side, and then we have flexion, which is all the way up, so bringing like your hand to your shoulder. Then we have the forearm supination, which would be your palm up, so like this. And then we have the forearm pronation, which would be with your palm facing down. The planes of movement it crosses is the sagittal, and it is a linear axis. So for your elbow, it's a biaxial degree or 2 degrees, and then for your forearm, it's a uniaxial or 1 degree. So next is our trunk. So the anatomical name is your torso. It is a ball and socket. The specific movements are rotation, which would be like if we have our arms crossed here, and then be rotating like this way, so your torso moves left to right. Then we have lateral flexion, which would be here and here, and then we have flexion and extension, which would be flexion would be coming down to our toes, and then extension would be moving backwards like that. The planes of movement it crosses are transverse and sagittal, and it's a linear axis. And then there are 3 degrees of freedom for the torso, making it a triaxial. So next we have is the hip, and I'm probably gonna botch this, but the anatomical name is the acetabulofemoral joint. It is another ball and socket. The specific movements are abduction, which would be moving your foot not like this, moving it out to the side like that. And then we have adduction, which would be like crossing your body, so crossing your the sagittal plane? Yeah, sagittal plane. And then we have flexion, which would be like bringing your knee up in like 90 degrees. And then we have extension, which would be bringing it all the way back like this. And then we have medial rotation and lateral rotation, which would be like if you're sitting at a table. Yeah, and like move your this way and then cross your body as well. So planes of movements are frontal, sagittal, and transverse, and it's on an angular axis. And then the hip has 3 degrees of freedom, making it a triaxle. So next up is the knees. The anatomical name for this is the tibiofemoral joint. This is a hinge joint. The specific movements are flexion and extension. So flexion being bringing it up a 90-degree angle, and then extension would just be straight down. The planes of movement, so it crosses the sagittal planes, and then it's a linear axis. The degrees of freedom, there's 2 of them, making it a biaxial. And lastly, we have our ankle. So the anatomical name for this is the talocrurular. I definitely didn't say that right. Joint, and then it's a hinge joint as well. The specific movements are dorsiflexion, so it would be like you're here, or like, and then pointing your toes up. Then we have plantar flexion, so it's pointing down. I like to say it's like you're pushing down on the gas pedal of your car. Then we have adduction, which would be pointing your toe towards the inside of your body, and then adduction is pointing towards the outside of your body. And then we have inversion and eversion. So inversion being, I read that right? Inversion being like your, inversion would be inward, so putting your thumb or your big toe inward, and then eversion would be like rolling outward for your ankle. Planes of movement are sagittal and frontal, and then this is on a linear axis. And then the degrees of freedom, it's 1 degree or a unit axle, but there can also be 2. And that's all.